Just a reminder that the meeting will be videoed for archival purposes, and for future reference. Just our usual process is we're going to do a few rounds of introductions in a minute. Panel members, if you're able to, can you leave your cameras on, so we know who's members of the panel. We've got in the council chamber a few of us as well. I'm not sure we've got any. Yeah, we've got Tony's joining us from home, but he's keeping her camera off at the moment, so that's fine. So, membership of the committee. I'll just do a quick round of introductions. So again, if officers can introduce themselves as we come to it. So I'm Andrew Marchington, Kirklees Councillor, Chair of the Children and Young People's Panel. Oliver.
I'm Oliver Gibson, Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Councillor Elizabeth Reynolds, Panel Member.
Councillor Paul White, Panel Member.
Thank you. And we've got Tony Bramley, who's joining us from home. Received apologies from Councillor Richard Smith and from James Holmwood this afternoon, who can't make it. Okay, so just while we're on introductions, we have said usually we officers introduce them, but this afternoon, I don't know if Vicky Metherington wants to introduce herself, but also it's Elaine McShane's last meeting, scrutiny meeting today. So I'm sorry we've not organised a bum fight for you. Well, it'd be a bit difficult over Teams, wouldn't it? So can we just say a really big thank you, Elaine, for all the contributions you've made to our meetings, and you're going to be making more contributions today. That's appreciated. We've really enjoyed you sharing our improvement journey with us. And the contributions you've made, and that again, as we've been going around and doing our scrutiny visits again, I know the work you've done is appreciated across the council as well. So a big thank you, Elaine. So that's great. I don't know if you want to say anything at the moment. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and again, it's not Elaine's replacement. We can't replace Elaine, but Vicky Metherington are going to be stepping into the role that Elaine has. So I don't you just quickly introduce yourself, Vicky.
Good afternoon. My name is Vicky Metheringham, and I'm taking over from Elaine as the Service Director for Child Protection and Family Support in Kirklees. I'm delighted to do so, and sad to see Elaine move on, but I know that it's time for you, isn't it, Elaine, now? I've heard that.
Yeah. Well, and again, we wish Elaine a long and happy retirement. And lots of things I'm sure they still want to do. Great. Right, minutes of the previous meeting, page 1 to 4. Panel members, can we approve those as a correct record? Yeah, that's fine. I think any matters arising will come up in the body of the meeting. Panel members, have we got any interest to declare on any items on the agenda? No, we have not. This is a meeting in public. All of our decision-making meetings are in public unless there is not to. If anything comes up on the agenda that we need to discuss in private session, I'll ask one of the panel members to move the appropriate resolution, but we don't envisage that happening this afternoon. Helen, any deputations or petitions? No. Any questions from members of the public? We have not. Thank you. So, I'm going to go on to item 7 then, which is performance data, children's services update on highlights. We've had quite a long session prior to this meeting scrutinising the data. Again, we tend to do that in private session because a lot of we don't want to identify any children or families involved in that. We also do a lot of scrutiny of data when we're going around and doing our visits, and we see that happening as well at a lot of panels as well. So, but I just think there's one or two things we'd like to discuss in the public meeting so that members of the public are aware of what we are scrutinising and for us to have a bit of a debate about it. So I think one of the things that we have been looking at is data around exclusions in schools. So John, do you want to just let us know about some work that's hopefully we're going to be scrutiny work that's taking place on that?
Thank you very much, Chair. My name's Joanne Sanders. I'm Service Director for Learning and Early Support. Yes, thank you. So colleagues and scrutiny panel are particularly aware that we have an ambition across Kirklees as part of our Kirklees Futures, which is our district learning strategy to secure zero exclusions by 2030. That being that we find the right and most appropriate pathways for youngsters by securing sufficient places that meet the needs of our learners. So absolutely, one of the things that is key to us then is to report in some depth around the numbers of permanent exclusions and also suspensions or fixed term exclusions, as they were called last year. So thank you to the panel members. They've asked for a more in-depth report, so we can break that down in terms of key stages, so how old these youngsters are that are being subject to permanent exclusion, and those that are currently being suspended. We've also been asked, and we will undertake to do this, some deeper analysis as to the reasons for any exclusions. And just to make really clear as well, councillors and panel members, that we are looking not just at children educated in Kirklees schools, but any children that are Kirklees residents but might be educated in schools elsewhere. So that piece of work will be underway. We'll also look at what the reasons are, how many youngsters might have some other characteristics. For example, they might have an education, health and care plan, or they might be have support for SEND. And very much we want to be able to use that data to see whether there is any trends emerging, so that we can direct, I suppose, the resource to get the support in as early as possible, whether that's from our education safeguarding service, our behaviour outreach support, or indeed from our family support service. So we are using that data. We'll bring a more detailed analysis back for panel in March, and yeah, it's something that the Education and Learning Partnership Board, which is comprised of school leaders, governors, and other parties, and it's chaired by the lead member for schools, aspiration and communities. It's something that we're all very keen to see, so that we can ensure we've got the right sufficiency for both services and places to meet the needs of our youngsters. I can give some headlines if that's helpful for panel.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so just in terms of where our youngsters, the number of permanent exclusions, if we focus on that, at this moment in time, permanent exclusions are on an increase. They've increased from last academic year to this academic year. And just in terms of the spread across what that looks like, just bear with across key stages. So to give you an idea, the largest proportion is at key stage 3 and key stage 4, so that's in the secondary years, and a limited number at key stage 1 and a lower number at key stage 2. There's no particular pattern that is emerging in the respect of whether it's a particular type of school, but what I would want to make clear to panel members is that there are small numbers at the schools involved, and there are a small number of schools, bearing in mind we've got just under 200 schools across Kirklees. It's definitely boys that are subject to permanent exclusion as a higher proportion than girls, and certainly physical assault seems to be a prevalence in terms of the reasons why youngsters are being excluded, but actually those are DFE labels, and what we'd want to be able to do is provide a little bit more detail as to what that actually constitutes, so that people are working from a basis of detail rather than assumption. One thing that probably is worth noting as well, although sometimes youngsters are issued with a permanent exclusion, schools do look at that, and governing bodies are looking at those very carefully, and not all the notifications do lead to permanent exclusions. In some instances, governor disciplinary committees or schools having reviewed have reinstated pupils, and that's a really important distinction as well. So and then there's some further analysis that needs to be undertaken in relation to suspensions. We know that there were some huge challenges at the back end of last academic year, particularly around several schools. So we'll want to be able to bring back some of that detailed analysis next time, particularly so that we can direct early support to work with our schools to make sure that they have the support that they need to avoid exclusions moving forwards. So is that okay for a summary at this moment in time? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, that's a great summary of where we're at the moment. Panel members, have got any questions for Joanne? Oliver?
Yeah, I was just wondering how these figures, because we go back to November 2021, don't we, with these figures, how these compare to pre-lockdown, pre-COVID figures, whether there are any long-term behavioural impacts of the removal of face-to-face teaching upon pupils. Because it's difficult making sense of just raw data sometimes, isn't it? I think, yeah.
Thank you for that question. I think you're absolutely right. It's really important that we have a look beyond when there was disruption to education. For many youngsters, they weren't in school in the same way that they were before the pandemic. So just to, perhaps I mean, we can certainly pick that up in the report to show the trends over time. But if I just give you some indication around what's actually happening around schools and partners being inclusive. So in line with our, as I said, our Kirklees Futures ambitions, we are having strong engagement across our system of school leaders, and we're considering how we're developing some of those solutions together. That also straddles our SEND transformation plan, and we've got we're developing a strategy which will be owned system wide, and it'll focus on those reducing exclusions. It is really important to understand the reasons why, like you say. So one of the things that we have got in place is we've developed a dashboard, and we'll be sharing that out with our schools, and also with other professionals at behaviour and attendance collaboratives, at our secondary heads and AP networks and fair access protocol meetings. And we know that there are real opportunities to embed this in the primary sector. I think I said about support. There's been recruitment of a team of specialist teachers for social, emotional and mental health strand to support schools. Also learners and their families at a much earlier point. And just today, following a cabinet report that was heard back in December, we are out to tender now for some new alternative provision. So that we've done some market engagement just after that cabinet report, and now we're able to procure some additional places for alternative provision, and that includes medical teaching, it includes primary, secondary, turnaround provision, as well as alternative pathways. And we know this has been undertaken after a needs analysis, and it'll allow us to have greater capacity and opportunities across the system to support the needs of our youngsters. So yeah, absolutely. In terms of we can bring back the trends, it is different. We are seeing some, particularly some mental health challenges for some of our learners, which is likely, but not always attributed to some of the challenges following the pandemic and youngsters getting out of patterns of patterns of attendance. So not only are we looking at exclusions, but we're also keeping a really close eye on attendance and encouraging strategies to make sure attendance is as strong as it can be. Actually, in Kirklees, we've got strong attendance figures, but it is something that we're keeping under review in line with new guidance that's recently been issued by the department. So it is inclusion, but it's also attendance and making sure we're supporting wherever possible. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for your question, Oliver, and thank you for your response, John. One of the other issues we've been picked up in the data is about children's mental health. So, Tom, do you want to just pick up on what we were discussing there, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Tom Brailsford, Service Director for Resources Improvement and Partnerships. And yeah, I think we had quite an in-depth discussion about the CAMS waiting times and the fact that what we saw in July and August was a reduction in CAMS waiting times and some questions around that. I think what had happened in July and August is that we saw a number of urgent referrals come into the system. And the waiting times are measured on from contact to first appointment. So what happened throughout July and August is the CAMS professionals prioritised those first assessments and worked very flexibly to ensure that that surge in demand was, there was enough clinicians there to meet that need and assess those children safely. So that resulted in the reduction in waiting times in terms of using our resources more flexibly. So I think it's obviously we don't we didn't want to see a surge in demand, but what I think that's shown us is that we can work more flexibly when we do see a surge in demand to be able to flex the clinicians to meet that need appropriately. So I think that's quite pleasing to see. I think a couple of other things that came out of that was that making sure that people in the system, particularly in the school system, are really clear about pathways for immediate support, including not using A&E for immediate support, going through the single point of access, which enables the crisis and home treatment teams to respond more appropriately. Looking at where we can use our mental health support teams in schools, which we have a number around Kirklees, to be able to better support school staff and with a range of things, including eating disorders and self-harm. And then thinking about in the future where there are surges in demand and particular issues in particular communities, making sure that we can redeploy staff rapidly to meet that need. So I think although in the figures it showed the waiting times had reduced, back into September, they've gone up again slightly as we've gone back into normal service structure. But I think we're going to be bringing back a fuller in-depth picture of the CAMS waiting times and the models that we're going to be looking at moving forward to scrutiny in March, I think, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions from panel members? Elizabeth? Yeah.
Not so much a question, just a little observation, but both of the two questions that have just been talked about, there was a surge at the end of last academic year, mental health and exclusions, and I think that's just worth noting. And I know that, and I'm sure that you're on it, but it would be interesting to see what actually caused that. It might be, coincidence, but it suggests that the maybe the effect of pandemic actually took a while to kick in that way. But it would be interesting to see that. But thank you.
Yeah, we'd be interested to see some information coming back about that. So that'd be great. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Right, I think the other thing we picked up, and this is just a general, so we're operating a nationally, there's an issue around recruitment to child protection, social people working within child protection, within social work. That's not necessarily the case. You've got to remember that national headlines don't always reflect the picture in Kirklees, so we need to do an unpick about. One of the things we do when we go out on our visits is talk to frontline child protection staff about their caseloads and the teams that they're working. Great strength in that in Kirklees. We're picking up, but it is an ongoing concern within the national picture about making sure we're recruiting staff into this important area work in Kirklees. So Elaine, if you sort of fill us in on some of the things that Kirklees is doing to recruit and retain staff. Thank you.
I certainly will. Thank you very much for the opportunity to do so. So for some time now, people will be aware that we actually don't have agency social workers in Kirklees, and that's unusual because across the country other local authorities do. That's been based on actually looking at our workforce and what is in the best interest of them and our families. So we took a decision some time ago in consultation with the workforce that we would move away from agency social workers. To support that development, then we introduced what we call a step-up training programme for social workers. We have a frontline training programme for social workers. These are graduates that have took a previous degree and applied specifically for these types of programme to come into social work. And actually, we started off with smaller numbers and we've built that. And this next year, we've asked for additional step-up students, and we've asked the frontline programme comes in a cohort of 4. And we've asked for an additional cohort this year, and that's about our succession planning. The other thing that we have as well, we have students from universities across the region who are making a positive choice to come into Kirklees as part of starting their social work career. And what I would say with all these practitioners, once they've completed their social work training, they are making that positive choice to remain in Kirklees. That's not to say that we don't have any vacancies, and that can ebb and flow depending on where we are at any time of the year. What I would say is what we're seeing more of is that actually social workers are being recruited internally. So they're moving to be into advanced practitioner posts, team manager posts, trying a different part of the service. So we are returning practitioners more. And the other thing that we've introduced last year was apprenticeships. So we're wanting as well to expand that. So look into the services out there in the community where we've got really skilled, knowledgeable practitioners that are working in family support, for example, if they want to go to be an apprentice and do training through that route. And then that's about having a pathway for our other qualified practitioners to become social workers if that's what they choose to do. Because we have had some vacancies and a slight increase in caseloads, what we've chosen to do, thinking about the National Care Review and where that will take us, we've looked to introduce some family support workers into our social work teams, and that will really put some capacity in for the family support workers to do some of the day-to-day work, so social workers can concentrate on their statutory requirements. And actually, I have to say that's been really well received. We've actually got a small number that have started, and actually staff have really welcomed that. We've also introduced contact and liaison officers, and that will deal with families on a day-to-day basis, but help social workers manage their diaries, deal with Section 17 payments. That's a financial payment, again, to enable social workers to focus on their statutory work. In our children looked after teams, we've introduced some youth engagement workers that link strongly to the youth engagement service, and that will work with some of the most vulnerable young people in our children looked after arena that actually need that additional support on a day-to-day basis. So again, that's a balance between those roles and the role of the social worker, and making sure that actually there's somebody readily available for the young people when they actually need it, recognising that social workers have a caseload of probably about 18 to 20 individuals. So we need somebody that's timely available. So we have a regular practice progress meeting, and that was held last week, and actually Vicky attended for the first time, and our service managers and team manager were talking about you know, what's working well for them, where the challenges are, and what they were describing as you know, how there are challenges in the workforce, but morale is in a really good place. Individuals are really choosing to come and work in Kirklees and are committed to staying and working with our children and young people. So not exactly where we want to be, but actually in a good place. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine, for the update on that staffing recruitment retention. Do panel members have got anything to? No. And again, as I say, we've had a number of visits now to the child protection teams. It's really good to see. I think one Friday we actually went to a team meeting, and actually the care and concern that staff have for each other in those environments to do that. You know, making sure that they're getting the relevant support with caseloads and that. So we appreciate that work that's been done, and a real positive feeling within the Kirklees term. Notwithstanding that some of the work is quite difficult at times, and we appreciate that and the relevant skills. So thank you, Elaine, for that update. So that's just some of the highlights from the performance data report. Again, we've got corporate parenting board tomorrow morning, which again we'll be looking at, and Elizabeth and I will be there. We'll be asking more questions about the data. That probably preempts the bit later on the agenda, so I don't think we'll be feeding back from tomorrow's meeting later on, but we will be asking relevant questions tomorrow. So we're on to item 8, and really pleased to welcome to our meeting this afternoon Mel Meggs, our Director for Children's Services. Mel, over to you.
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Chair. So I just thought I'd take an opportunity to just talk a little bit about the budget process and its impact on children's services. Clearly, we're not in a position yet to publish any detailed proposals, but I wanted to talk about the general principles that we're applying, and then agree with Scrutiny post the publication of the proposals, how Scrutiny may want to have a look and scrutinise those proposals. So that was the sort of purpose of me doing the introduction now, so that we can get that scheduled in to the Scrutiny programme. So as you will be aware, we've been preparing a one-year budget for 23-24, and we've been working on that for some time, as we established that there were some significant gaps that were reported in our last monitoring visit. So gap as in the amount of money that we have to spend versus the amount of money we were scheduled to spend. So that monitoring led us to take 2 actions early in this financial year. So the first was to have a look across the council about where we can stop spending money, and that's largely due to the increasing costs that we've seen around staffing pay rises, utility costs, and other service delivery costs. So food inflation, for instance, has an impact on us across the board. So we had a look at what we could do to stop spending some money, and we made some plans in year. So that includes there being an overall recruitment freeze, and that we have set up a what's called a people's panel that looks at requests to recruit, and first has a look to see whether we can recruit anyone internally, and then also looks to see whether, if we do decide to go ahead and recruit a post, that post is essential to our delivery. So inevitably we've been focusing on making sure that our frontline staff services can keep going and keep going to a good quality, and that where we can delay recruitment for some posts, that we've been able to do that. And in children's services, we have made a significant contribution to the in-year savings as a result of that. There have also been some changes around which buildings we're using and how we deploy our staff, and again that's about trying to make sure we're as efficient, as effective as we can be at a time when we really need, when every penny counts. So we've also then started to work on the what would our savings, what would be our priority for both savings and investment, because I think it's really important that even in the most difficult budget processes, when we're experiencing difficulty, we will always want to talk about priorities for investment. And so we've been having a look, and there'll be no surprises for you. We've been looking at where we've got the biggest growth in demand, and for us that's for in SEND. And, you know, we've made a commitment to invest council monies into the SEND transformation programme. So clearly we wanted to prioritise that, because that's the deal, the safety valve deal that we talk about, that we signed off from the government, that expects a level of council monies to be put into the programme, along with the school system's contribution. So it's not just the council, but what comes out of the schools budgets. And then we've also seen a massive increase in demand this year, and the cost of, so an increase in demand, but also an significant increase in the cost of school transport. So we've wanted to make sure that there are no barriers to children attending school, as Joe was talking about earlier. And so we have put some uplift into the school. We're suggesting there's some uplift proposing into school transport. So that's just a couple of examples of areas where, even when budgets are really tight, it's really important to invest. So then we've been having a look at what are our savings proposals for 23-24. We've clearly wanted to prioritise keeping support for frontline services and making sure we don't diminish those. And we're particularly keen, having learnt from austerity, about the importance of early help in this space, and wanting to make sure that we prioritise early help. So our budget savings, when you do get to see them, will be very much focused away from those frontline activities, and they fall into a number of categories. So there are some things, so whilst I can't go into the specifics, what we've done is there are some proposals that are about how we do things differently. So that's might be about management restructures, taking some posts out of management structures, having a look at the infrastructure that supports, for instance, different ways of working. Or it might be that currently we've got work being done by a separate team, and that we need to integrate that work into an existing team. So there's a range of those. We've then got some savings to achieve where we might want to think about how we fund differently. So the first one was how we conduct the activity differently, and the second is we might be able to find and identify different funding streams to do those things. And there'll be some proposals that require us to enter into negotiations with other organisations. And then the last category we've got really are where we need to invest to save. And so as you will all know, one of our biggest challenges at the moment is providing sufficient homes for children where they need to come into care, and sufficient places for children in Kirklees, both for those coming into care and those that need to need special education in Kirklees. So again, that sufficiency of both placements and education is really important for us. So we want to make sure that our children we'd like to aspire to the point where our children will have a choice about which home and how they live. And so there's but that will require us to make some investment to eventually get some savings through not placing children at long distances. That has become a particular challenge for us, and you'll see our children in care numbers have gone up slightly, and that's largely to do with the support we're providing for unaccompanied asylum seekers. And so we're needing to we will always need to review our sufficiency assessment as the needs change. So we will be looking at some different models of care as a result of that. So hopefully that's helpful. That I can, as I say, I can't give you the specifics at this point in time, but I would be keen for us to have some dialogue about how, once post-publication, what the role of scrutiny is in looking at those budget proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mel. So I don't know, are you wanting any questions at this stage about that, any of that, or are you just going to leave it as a statement for us? Sorry? Don't know. That's fine. Right, what we'll do, yeah. So thank you, Mel, for that presentation. I think we will have questions. It's really interesting to hear about your investment, particularly in SEND. And I think probably even at this stage, I mean, one of the issues we've picked up with Scrutiny, I know I've shared this before, is about coordinating some of the activity that's going on. A number of us were down at the local offer event at the John Smith Stadium before Christmas, and actually lots of community and voluntary sector groups, as well as other organisations, council, they're providing support to parents and carers for children with special needs. So actually, and that role about coordinate what we can do to make the best use of all the resources, whether that's council resources or the resources that individuals and communities put into supporting themselves and each other. So I think that's good that we're continuing that investment. But so we'll look forward to hearing updates as we move towards the budget process. Thank you. That's fine. Okay, on to item 9, pre-decision scrutiny. We heard Yeah, no, we haven't heard early meeting. So it was really good to be able to go to Cabinet before Christmas. There was the report on alternative provision, and the recommendations from Scrutiny were included to that. And again, it'd be no surprise, it's about longitudinal, looking at the outcome, what we're trying to achieve with investment in alternative provision, tracking the young people who are working out, the impact that has on the whole system. So we're looking forward to seeing the results of that. So I don't know, also I should have said thanks to Viv Kendrick and Carol Patterson, our two Cabinet members who are with us this afternoon, Viv online and Carol in the Council Chamber. So just open it, are there any issues that we might think are up for pre-decision scrutiny before they come to Cabinet, either from the Cabinet members or our officers, senior officers who are here today? Right, that's fine. That's why we're getting to, we're moving towards this sort of thing. But again, just thinking at the early stage where we can build in ways of us actually observing scrutiny already going on, and there's lots of that happening. The various panels and boards, we see lots of really good scrutiny going on. There's no point in us duplicating that, but also particularly as major reports, is this stuff we can look at them early enough to build into the outcomes. That's great. Thank you. Item 10 is feedback from issues at Corporate Parenting Board. As I've said, we're not going to be doing that. That meeting is tomorrow, but we will be asking questions about, again, some interesting information about adoption. Had come up at some of the panel meetings, so we'll be asking that, certainly picking that up tomorrow, and about foster, the work around increasing the number of fosterers, carers within Kirklees. That's quite important, so we'll be looking at some of that tomorrow. So, Children's Scrutiny Panel Work Programme is as published. I don't think at this stage we're adding anything to the work programme. I don't know if panel members have got anything that's come up. Oh. Yeah, so again, particularly for people who joining us online, if you want to go to the online agenda, you'll see the updates to the work programme, which give details of some of the visits we've been to. So we're actually having repeat visits to frontline social work teams, so that gives us an opportunity to contrast, and we are visiting a number of the other panels that are going on. What was the one we visited the other day? Yeah. Educational outcomes. Thank you, Paul. Yeah. No. Yeah. But actually that's really, again, what we were just there as observers, and what you're seeing is a wide variety of partners and professionals challenging each other about the information they're doing and their work, and that's really, really good to see. So it's, so we see that scrutiny going on. Okay. Right, I think that comes to the end of the formal agenda. What I forgot to do at the beginning in panel membership is Graham Sunderland, who's one of our co-optees, has unfortunately had to resign. So I'd just like to thank Graham for the contribution that he made to the Children and Young People's panel. That was appreciated. That's fine. So our next meeting in public of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Panel is on Monday, the 20th of March 2023 at 2 p.m. If you'd like to join us for that. So again, thank you everybody for their questions and contributions, and again thank you for all the hard work that you put into improving the outcomes for children and the children and young people of Kirklees. So that's most appreciated. Thank you. Bye.